Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take a whole stack of material, could be articles, transcripts, research, you name it, and, well, really dig in.
Yeah, pull out those nuggets of knowledge, those insights that you might miss otherwise.
Right.
We try to give you a shortcut to getting informed.
Exactly. And hopefully find those little aha moments along the way, the things that make it interesting, not just, dry information.
Think of us as guides, maybe,
Mhm.
for navigating through all this complex info. We're not telling you what to think.
No, definitely not. It's more about helping you understand what's in the material itself, what stands out, why it might matter.
Right, pointing out the interesting bits.
And today, wow, we have a deep dive it's really something else, almost like looking into a whole different world in a way.
Yeah, what do we got?
Our source material is mostly transcripts, and they seem to be connected to a YouTube channel called Doza Crew.
Ah, okay, Doza Crew.
And it's not just like song lyrics, though those might be in there. It's a whole collection. Gives this really unique kind of multi-layered look at their work, who they are, their whole worldview, it seems.
Interesting. So a variety of stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's a really diverse stack we looked through. We're pulling from discussions about specific songs they've done,
Okay.
but also these deep dives into their language use, which is apparently incredibly unique.
Linguistic practices, huh? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and exploring themes that keep popping up in their stuff, plus even some hints about how they work, sort of behind-the-scenes insights that came through in these transcripts.
Gotcha. So what's the plan? What's our mission for this one?
Well, the main goal is obviously to pull out the really crucial bits from all this varied material, but more than just listing things.
All right, we want to connect the dots.
Exactly. I pay really close attention to the cross connections. How do these different pieces, this strong identity they seem to have, their specific sound, how they use language, their whole approach to their craft, how does it all weave together?
What kind of picture does it paint overall? What is Doza Crew like about based on these sources?
Yeah, precisely. It feels a bit like piecing together a puzzle or maybe navigating a landscape that the sources themselves lay out for us.
Following the threads they give us to see the bigger tapestry. Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where? Where do the sources suggest this whole story starts? What's the foundation?
Well, based on everything we dug into, the absolute bedrock, the core of their identity, seems to be this idea they call the collective.
Ah, right. The collective. I remember seeing that. And the sources, especially one titled Das Kollektiv, they don't just mean like a group or a band.
No, it's presented as much more profound than that. It's framed as a single entity, a unified force, something much bigger.
Almost like a living thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That source literally calls it a living thing pulsing with the city's energy.
Wow.
And the language they use around this is incredibly consistent, always focusing on unity, shared strength. You see these phrases again and again.
Like,
Things like unity, shared strength, group spirit, connected hearts, united voices. It's all about togetherness.
and it's not just talk, right? They make some pretty bold claims about what this unity achieves. I remember one line that really stood out. Something like,
Was it the one about power? Together we are such that no power can harm us united.
that's the one.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Not just confidence. That sounds like claiming invincibility through their bond.
It really does. It paints this picture of the collective as this sort of impenetrable shield. But it's not just defensive.
No.
This unity, it's tied to a really strong sense of purpose,
Mm.
almost like it's destiny.
Right, like they're united for eternity. That phrase came up. And the idea that every individual heartbeat elevates the name of the collective.
Yeah, it's like every person contributes to this larger thing,
Yeah.
and they see themselves as ready to carry a torch, literally write history together.
So it elevates the whole thing way beyond just making music or being a crew. It's presented as something historic, meant to have a lasting impact.
You definitely get that sense of endurance. Phrases like, band together we are strong like an eternal bond,
Mm-hmm.
and that image of standing shoulder to shoulder.
Facing whatever comes.
Right. With this total conviction that the true will never go under, never perish. It's a declaration of resilience, of permanence, born right out of that collective bond.
What's really striking when you pull it all together from the sources is how fundamental this seems to be. This unity, this collective strength, it doesn't feel optional in how they describe it.
No, not at all. It's not something they choose to do. It's presented as just who they are. The sources say explicitly it's not optional, it's fundamental to their being.
Wow.
It's even described as a law of nature, like gravity or something. It simply must be.
Framing it as a law of nature. That's powerful. It makes it sound inevitable. Like,
Mhm.
this collective identity is just an inherent truth about them, the absolute foundation.
And this foundation, this collective, it's tied to a place, isn't it?
Yeah, very clearly. The source says it rises from the city's heart towards the blue sky, which strongly suggests, an authenticity, a grounding in the tough reality of the city of Berlin.
Berlin. Okay.
Mm.
Do the sources go into detail about that reality?
Not really. They don't give us like a guided tour of Berlin or anything, but they make it absolutely clear that the city is integral, its energy, its spirit, where the collective comes from. It's inseparable.
Okay. And how does this all come across? What's the tone when they talk about this core identity?
Oh, it's incredibly strong. The sources describe the tone as self-confident, celebratory, filled with the sense of purpose and power.
So very sure of themselves.
Completely. The material, especially in that Das Kollektiv source, is described as overwhelmingly positive about the crew focused on praising their strengths and vision. It's a very deliberate, very confident presentation of who they are.
Okay. So wrapping up this part, we've got this incredibly strong, unified, purpose-driven collective identity, rooted in Berlin, presented with absolute confidence. That's the bedrock.
That's the bedrock we see laid out, yeah.
Yeah.
So where do we go from there, from that internal strength?
Well, the next logical step the sources take us is from that internal strength, that unity, to how it translates outwards. Their expression, their drive for innovation, pushing boundaries.
Ah, okay. Because they don't just sit on that foundation, right? They build something on it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this is where it gets really interesting because it adds this whole other layer.
Mhm.
The sources, specifically Greets and Katzengold, they use this one word quite a bit to describe their music. Alien.
Alien, like E.T.
Huh. Well, no, not literally. The Greet Soren clarifies that. It's more about an identity, a feeling of being different, like an outsider.
Okay, I get it.
It's framed as coming from somewhere else completely, offering a whole new perspective, bringing futuristic waves,
Yeah.
like they have stars in their veins or something otherworldly.
So it's a metaphor for being unconventional, maybe futuristic.
Pretty much. And they translate that feeling into sound.
Yeah.
According to Greets and Katzengold, they use musical elements like, well, dissonance.
Okay, clashing notes.
Right. And weird time signatures,
Yeah.
things that don't sound typical.
So it throws you off balance a bit.
Exactly. Dissonance creates tension. Weird time signatures make the rhythm feel unpredictable. The sources say together they create an unsettling atmosphere.
Making the music feel deliberately unstable, like it's shifting under you.
Yeah, unstable is a key word they use. And add to that descriptions of distorted sounds and an industrial feel, which Greets mentions. You get this sonic landscape that sounds like it's designed to disrupt what you expect music to be.
And is this just being weird for the sake of it, or is there a purpose behind this alien sound?
According to the sources, there's definitely a purpose. It's tied directly to what they're trying to do. It's about warping reality, warping your perception of music.
Oh.
They apparently see themselves as birthing new art, actively trying to expand what music can even be.
So it's a challenge, a confrontation with musical norms.
Yeah, absolutely. The sources really emphasize that attitude.
Yeah.
They are actively breaking molds. They explicitly say, and this phrase pops up in Das Kollektiv and Greets, we rock Cosby, breaking barriers down, redefine sound.
Redefine sound, that's ambitious.
Totally. They position themselves way ahead of the curve, seeing themselves as pioneers, maybe even creating alien music, as Das Kollektiv puts it.
Okay, so confident, unified, pushing boundaries, creating this alien music to redefine sound itself, that's a powerful combination. But does this have a downside? This strong identity, this boundary pushing. The Greet source mentions something about exclusivity.
That's a really key observation from the sources, yeah. They point out that the crew don't seem too open to anyone who isn't totally with them.
Ah, like an us versus them thing.
Kind of.
Yep.
There's language about always dissing the haters that go stuck on rewind
Well.
and calling out like fossilized minds stuck in the past.
But okay, if you don't get it, you're out.
Pretty much. The Greek source actually frames this as a classic way to build a movement. You draw a clear line between those who get it and those who don't.
Then for those who are inside, it creates a strong sense of belonging, right?
Absolutely. It reinforces the group cohesion. But the source itself raises a really important question. For us, and for you listening, can a movement really be inclusive if it demands 100% buy-in?
Good question.
It suggests that this powerful, forward-looking identity, while forging these incredibly strong bonds inside the collective, it inherently creates division outside. It's almost like the necessary flip side of that intense unified identity we talked about earlier.
Right. The stronger the U.S., the clearer the them.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving from identity and their outward sound, let's pivot. The source has spent a lot of time on language.
Oh, yeah. Language seems absolutely central for Dozit Crew. And as we look through the material, this fascinating duality emerged in how they seem to use it.
Duality. How so?
Well, on one side, it's incredibly playful and experimental. There's a source called Zugenschut that introduces this concept they call word acrobatics, or, Wortakrobatik in German.
Word acrobatics. I like that. What's the idea behind it?
The philosophy, translated from Zugenschut, is powerful. A little intense, even. Werde Worte bis sie brechen, twist words until they break.
Whoa. Break the words.
Yeah. It's not just using words, it's about pushing boundaries within language, testing the breaking point, exploring the tensile strength of language. How much can you bend and twist sounds before they fracture?
That's a fascinating way to think about it.
The source uses this great metaphor to navigating a labyrinth der Sprache, a labyrinth of language, and they describe doing it with immense skill focus.
So it's not just messing around, it takes skill.
Definitely. And Zugenschut highlights this dual nature of their wordflow. It's called both Kunstwerk und Akrobatik, artwork and acrobatics.
Artwork and acrobatics. Okay, explain that.
Well, the artistry, the Kunstwerk, is about the aesthetic quality. Sounds that dance versus measured like clockwork. It's about precise rhythm, musicality, treating sounds like clay, maybe, sculpting them.
Making it sound good, basically.
Right. But the acrobatics part, that's about the sheer difficulty, the athletic performance it requires. Zugenschut describes it needing both physical and mental agility.
Physical, like tongue twisters.
Exactly. But on another level, intense, rapid, precise control of your mouth, tongue, lips, jaw, breath control, while spitting out these complex sequences, like gymnastics for your vocal cords.
Okay, I can picture that. And the mental part.
Just as demanding. Processing these complex sequences of sounds and words, memory, anticipation, executing it all perfectly, often at a sprint through that language labyrinth.
Wow. Do the sources give examples of these challenges, this Wortakrobatik?
They do. They get pretty specific, actually. We don't need to list every single phonetic detail here, but they highlight things like packing dense clusters of similar sounds together, especially at the start of words.
Making it hard to say clearly and quickly.
Exactly, like that air frost example, or those intense Z and ZW clusters mentioned. It's taking sounds that are already triggering and just piling them up, demanding surgical precision.
What else?
Difficult consonant clusters inside words, too, like repeated KN sounds, or that Kugel-Schnipter passage, which the source calls a sustained assault on articulation. Forces your mouth into really specific, rapid movements.
And length. German words can be long.
Oh, yeah. Sheer length is a factor, especially with those compound words. Imagine trying to maintain clarity and breath over something like Dampfschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitän. It's like a vocal marathon.
I can't even say it slowly.
Right. And they combine length with complexity, long sentences that also repeat difficult sounds, like that PF sound example. Doing that fast, clearly, while tracking the sentence structure. It's a serious test.
It sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
Then there's the mental workout stuff. Repetition with subtle variations, like the Bibliothekarin examples, repeating similar structures quickly, demanding total focus on tiny details while keeping the speed and clarity, like a verbal tightrope.
Okay.
And tricky logic structures, the Walzer passage or Irrig similar examples that Zugenschut calls a verbal Rubik's Cube. You're not just talking fast, you're talking fast while twisting concepts around.
So it's conceptually difficult, too.
Yeah. And finally, just repeating similar sounding words or focusing on surgically precise pronunciation within words, like the isk in Whiskey Mixer, it demands incredible control to stop sounds blurring together at speed.
Okay, so this Wortakrobatik is serious business. Is it connected to their overall mission?
Definitely. The sources link it back to a mission statement seen in Source 3. Mission: hit every syllable with precision, having a sharp tongue. Schlag meine Mission, strike my mission, no lingering, no hesitation.
So the difficulty serves the purpose of demonstrating absolute control.
Exactly. The sources frame these examples as showing this relentless quest for absolute verbal clarity and control. It's described almost like a high-stakes linguistic sport, or wrestling for the crown.
So it highlights the dedication, the training, the rigor behind it. It's not just playful chaos, it's a demanding craft.
Precisely. It's a serious pursuit of linguistic excellence.
You said there was a duality. That's the intricate artistic side. What's the other side the sources show?
Well, the sources don't just show language used for artistry and precision. They also present a much, much darker side, a more brutal side.
Okay. Like what?
Other sources, like Pissinger, Arschkrampen, and especially the Hans source material, they showcase language that is, well, aggressive, vulgar, often hateful.
Hateful. How so?
The Pissinger transcripts describe audio that's intense, very aggressive, filled with serious hatred. It mentions specific examples, homophobic slurs, attacks on family members,
Wow. Okay.
and it highlights the raw repetition. Phrases like Holtschmalal and Du Pisser, just repeated over and over, like a barrage.
And what's the interpretation there? Why the intensity?
The source offers possibilities. Could be a dominance thing, trying to shut the other person down. Could be pure rage or just spewing whatever comes to mind in the heat of the moment. But whatever the reason, the language is clearly presented as a weapon.
A weapon wielded with force.
Okay.
Okay, and the Hans story, you said that takes it further.
Oh yeah, Hans Deutsch edition, detail language described as extreme, direct, and yeah, pretty vulgar. Deutschgehend beleidigen, continuously insulting, sehr aggressive. They call it sprachliche Rohkost, linguistic raw food. Just raw, crude insults delivered with this monotone consequence, a monotone consistency.
Can you give some examples, though? Maybe keep it PG-ish for us.
Well, the sources list things like calling Hans a Scheißgirl, an echter Arschloch, ein Wichser. Another character, Gertrude, gets called Drecksau and Futze. There's a whole range from Die Hurensohn to Pisnelke, describing Hans's face as an Arschgesicht, glowing with malice. Even figures like a pastor or friends get hit with crude names like Streinepriester, Drecksalzer, Arschkeks, Penisgesicht. It's relentless.
And this isn't just verbal.
No. The sources note physical actions mirroring it, showing the middle finger, throwing stuff like a shit sausage. It underlines the crude, visceral nature of the conflict in that story.
So what's the point of language like that, according to the sources?
The interpretation in the Hans sources is key. It's not nuanced communication. It's pure aggression. It's presented in a caricature-like way. Malice is extremely überzeichnet, extremely exaggerated. Communications through insults is the etablierte Norm, the established norm in that specific narrative world.
So language is the weapon there. It's the main tool for interaction, however brutal.
Exactly. It's explicitly called a weapon.
Is there any line they won't cross, even in that context?
It's darkly fascinating, but the Hans source actually notes potential Abstufungen, gradations. It observes that one particular insult, Arschficker, apparently Wolfsviking, probably went too far.
Huh. So even in that extreme world, there's some kind of internal limit. Strange.
It is. But what this whole duality highlights, connecting across the sources, is the immense power of language. The Pissinger source says it outright. Words can be weapons, used to hurt and threaten, but it also acknowledges the flip side. They can be used to help and support.
And the Pissinger sources bring in the online context, right? Hate speech.
Yeah, they connect the aggressive language in some transcripts to things like the online disinhibition effect, anonymity, feeling less accountable behind a screen, the psychological shield it provides, and the echo chamber effect, creating a potential breeding ground for hate speech.
So the online environment might amplify this darker use of language.
Potentially, yeah. And there's another intriguing layer in some Pissinger transcripts, heavily coded language, jargon, insider speak, almost like a secret message.
Coded language. Why?
Well, the interpretations offered are, it could be used to exclude outsiders, create a sense of belonging for the initiated, but crucially, it could also mask some pretty harmful activities.
Masking things. That sounds ominous. Does it connect to anything else?
Potentially, this idea of coded language, plus these mysterious file names like Franco 1101 that have precise timestamps,
Yeah.
it leads the source to speculate, suggests something deliberate, maybe specialized software, possibly even hints towards law enforcement or gathering evidence.
Evidence, like a crime.
The source mentions the clue Pitsy, which can apparently mean police in that context. It turns the language itself into potential clues in, like a crime drama or a digital jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
And the sources explore links. Could this coded aggressive language be tied to dominance, rivalry? There's a phrase mentioned like Crown TRG downfall, or even a visionary leader of maybe a cult-like group. The main point is that these online spaces where this language exists can be battlegrounds where real-world stakes are being played out.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this whole language picture from the sources.
It's complex.
It really is. On one hand, does accrue, or narratives linked to them, show language used with incredible creative energy. Precise, artistic, word acrobatic, building worlds, pushing boundaries.
But on the other hand,
In other contexts or stories presented, language becomes this brutal weapon, raw aggression, dominance, exclusion, reflecting some pretty dark aspects of human interaction, especially online.
so it's this stark duality, the precise art versus the brutal weapon.
Exactly. And it powerfully underscores the immense, maybe even terrifying power of words, a theme that just resonates across all these different sources we looked at. Okay, moving beyond identity and language specifically, as we went through the sources, did other big themes or narratives keep showing up? Things that weave through their work?
Oh, absolutely. It felt like they revisit certain core ideas from different angles. Power and control, for instance, is huge and pops up everywhere.
We saw that with the collective strength in Das Kollektiv and the language used for dominance in Pissinger and Hans.
Right. But sources like Katzengold broaden it out. They mention discussions of real-world power structures, political satire, dictators referencing Huppenset, which apparently brings in ideas from things like Tamania Sandman, even political stuff in airplane radio.
So external power structures, too.
Yeah, and Katzengold also touches on the psychological side of power, like that Sandman character potentially representing subconscious control or manipulation. It really frames power as this central question they keep exploring. Who has power, how it's used, the consequences internally, externally.
It sounds like a connector theme, linking personal stuff, creative work, and bigger societal commentary.
Exactly. And then there's darkness, struggle, and resilience. That comes through really strongly, too.
Where do we see that?
Sources like Wuriwawas and Katzengold are full of references to bleak stuff. Darkness and struggle, inner turmoil, fighting with madness, that really intense phrase, holding the devil in my belly. Lost dreams, past traumas, feeling trapped, and that German word absturz, crash or downfall, used in Wuriwawas. It paints a picture of really grappling with difficulties.
But it's not just despair, right? You said resilience, too.
Definitely not just despair. The sources balance it strongly with resilience and defiance. Wuriwawas and Katzengold talk about pushing back against the darkness, finding strength in the struggle, a fight to break free.
Like fighting back.
Yeah, and that image from Wuriwawas, dancing on a knife's edge with broken wings, that's incredibly powerful. It's presented as a symbol of fighting, creating beauty despite damage or lost freedom. Finding a spark of resilience, taking ownership, a reclaiming of power, even when things are tough. And the sources note the music itself can embody these feelings.
So struggle is acknowledged, but defiance seems key. What about community? We talked about the collective.
Right, community and belonging is central to that positive collective identity in Das Kollektiv. And other sources like Katzengold, BKRD and Platt, and Grady mention finding support in smaller groups or fan bases. That's there.
But is it always positive?
Well, the sources show some nuance. Huppenset, which is cited in Katzengold, hints that they're aware of the potential downsides of group identity, too.
Ah, okay, so they see the potential negatives.
It seems so. And that awareness contrasts with the strong belonging created by that us versus them vibe from Greets, or the exclusion that can come from coded language in Pissinger. So community isn't presented as purely simple or positive. Its complexities, its potential for division, are also acknowledged.
Interesting. What other recurring themes came up?
Another really fascinating one is the blurring of reality and fiction. The sources, especially GRD and Katzengold, explicitly point this out. They note this fuzzy line in the work.
How does that manifest?
They mention how the crew seems to mix maybe real characters or details, like real places or dates, with totally fictional stuff, like that world of Tamania from Hippenset, or their own internal mythology as explored in Doza Deepest Dive, Doza Projects.
Gotcha, so mixing the real and the made-up.
Yeah, and that Rhubarber story is a perfect example. Detailed in Rhubarber battle rep reps and the related deep dive source. It starts super mundane. A baker, her cake, a bar. Sounds real, right?
Totally.
But then it just spins out into fantasy. Rhubarberstan, the Rhubarb Queen, it becomes this whole creative project or fictional world, shows that deliberate slide from reality into fiction.
And you mentioned even the really aggressive stuff like Pissinger or Hans can feel performed.
Yeah, exactly. Despite presenting these seemingly real-world scenarios, they can be so extreme, so caricature-like, that they almost feel like narratives or performance art, as noted in the Hans sources. It constantly makes you, the listener, question, is this real? Or is it a crafted story designed to provoke or make a point? Where is that line?
Keeps you guessing. Okay, anything else thematic?
Yeah, one more. Humor and absurdity. It threads through a lot of this, sometimes in unexpected places. Sources like Wart's Kaleidoscopy, Doza Project's Leak, Rhabarber Barbara, Arschkrampen, and Hans all mention it.
Humor, even with the dark stuff.
Sometimes, yeah. The sources talk about a playful side, experimentation, embracing the nonsensical Katzengold Doza Project's Leak, the silliness of names like Rhabarber Barbara, or even the sheer creativity in the nonstop insults in Hans and Arschkrampen. Hans' source notes a darkly funny element there.
Okay.
Arschkrampen seems particularly centered on absurdity and grotesque imagery. And the sources even cite specific weird lyrics like sheep farts and Miro stink from Doza Project's Leak as examples of deliberately embracing weirdness, challenging what counts as serious music.
So pushing boundaries through absurdity, too.
Exactly. It's another way they challenge norms, not just musically, but thematically.
Okay, so across all these themes, power, struggle resilience, community complexities, blurred reality, humor absurdity, the sources reveal this really complex, sometimes contradictory, but always engaging worldview. They're like lenses Doza Crew uses to look at the world.
Yeah, definitely not simple themes. They seem to be grappling with big ideas.
Now let's shift focus a bit. Underlying all this creative output, the music, the language, the themes, what do the sources say about the craft involved? The dedication, the process, it can't all be spontaneous, right?
No, definitely not. And the sources give us this absolutely fantastic parallel to understand this dedication. It's in the Uhrmacher Handwerksgeschichten source, the story of the watchmaker, Ulrich, and his workshop.
A watchmaker, how does that connect?
Well, stick with me. The source describes Ulrich as this highly respected master watchmaker. He built his reputation on exceptionally complex work. From his specialized workshop, the Armascher Bedarfswerkstatt. So that's his baseline. Foundational reputation, individual mastery.
Okay, a skilled craftsman, got it.
But the story emphasizes that the real recognition, the highest level, came from more than just Ulrich working alone. Collaboration was crucial.
Ah, collaboration, like the collective idea.
Kind of, yeah. The sources introduce Urban, a watchmaker tool creation engineer. He provided indispensable high-precision tools. Ulrich needed these specialized tools to even do his most complex work.
Okay, so the master needs the right tools. Makes sense.
And then there's Ursula, Urban's assistant. She contributed new sketches and plans for innovative clockworks, developed with Urban. So Urban's tools enabled the complex work Ulrich was already doing. But Ursula's designs, created with Urban, were the spark. They brought the future into the present.
So it's mastery plus tools plus innovation.
Exactly. Ulrich's mastery plus Urban's essential tools plus Urban and Ursula's collaborative innovation. It's a combination.
Okay, and then what happens?
Inspector Owe comes by. Initially, he's deeply impressed just by Ulrich's individual skill, the clockworks he makes on his own. That's impressive enough. But the sources make a point of saying he became so impressed, like significantly more impressed, when he saw the convergence of all three elements working together.
A whole package.
Right. The precise clock works from Ulrich, enabled by Urban's tools, combined with Urban and Ursula's forward-thinking designs. Seeing the synergy.
And what did that synergy demonstrate?
According to the sources, it showed the workshop wasn't just excellent right then. It, not only at the peak right now, but had the engine to stay there or even push further. It showed potential for sustained, collaborative innovation built on that foundation of mastery.
So it wasn't just about the present, but the future, too.
Exactly. And the result. The highest honor, the highest distinction of the watchmakers wasn't given just to Ulrich. It was bestowed upon the workshop.
The whole team.
Yeah, transforming it into this renowned, maybe even legendary center for exquisite watchmaking art. Described in almost magical terms, simply magical and awesome, making the world dance. And the sources explicitly note the collective effort. Phrases like Sign Team Brinks, the team delivers, and Shane V, they create like a comma, implying seamless coordination. It wasn't one genius, it was the collaborative unit reaching the peak.
Okay, that's a great story. How does it connect back to Doza Crew, beyond the general idea of craft?
Well, it's fascinating how this narrative dedication, collaboration, pursuing excellence in a complex craft, parallels aspects of their work. Think about that intense dedication to Warder-Chromatic we discussed.
Right, the linguistic precision.
The descriptions of rigorous training, precision, wrestling for the crown from Zeugenschut. It perfectly mirrors the watchmaker's pursuit of excellence, just in a different medium language instead of gears and springs.
Okay, I see the parallel in dedication and skill. What about the collaboration and innovation part?
Well, the Doza Project's leak and Doza Deep's dive. Doza Project's sources give hints about their broader process. They show raw, experimental pieces, intentionally blurring the line between creation and the final product. They even include things that sound like instructions in the lyrics.
Like showing the process itself.
Yeah. And the mention of a DOZA catalog, this archive, with all sorts of output, including their own deep dives analyzing their work, it suggests maybe the analysis is part of the art.
Huh. Like they're studying themselves.
Possibly. It points to a deliberate, maybe even analytical approach to what they do, even when it seems chaotic or absurd. It implies there's a deliberate hand guiding, with recurring motifs acting as anchors, as noted in Doza Project's leak.
Still not random.
Doesn't seem like it. It suggests a considered, maybe collaborative craft, much like that watchmaker's workshop, aiming for a unique kind of excellence and constantly pushing the boundaries of their form.
Okay, that watchmaker analogy really helps frame the dedication involved. Now let's try to bring this all together by looking at one more crucial element. The relationship with the audience. You, the listener. How do the sources portray that, especially given all this complexity?
It's consistently highlighted as absolutely vital. Das Kollektiv, that core identity source, makes it crystal clear. They extend that collective identity outwards to include the audience.
So the audience becomes part of the collective.
In a way, yeah. There's a huge community aspect mentioned. Gratitude. They go as far as calling the audience the real heroes.
Oh, why heroes?
Because it's not passive consumption. The audience is the fuel their engine. There's that quote, your clicks, your comments, that engagement isn't passive. It's the fuel for their journey. That's incredibly direct.
So engagement directly powers them. It dissolves that typical artist-listener boundary.
Completely. It turns it into a shared story-writing history together, transforms it from a performance for people into an experience with people. And the sources frame this not just as nice sentiment, but as a crucial partnership, symbiotic. They state the audience is indispensable.
Indispensable. Strong word. Do they acknowledge this directly in their work?
Explicitly. They say things like, we celebrate all you people, for you too, directly addressing the listener as part of it all. They state, you are part of the we who are always together. There are thanks for friendship that frees us, which might initially be about crew bonds, but the feeling extends and explicitly thanks to all of you who constantly support us.
So they make it clear the audience is valued.
Very. Phrases like, your support makes us strong, directly link audience engagement to the crew's power. And they make it tangible, promising shout-outs, naming names soon, celebrating shared wins. Oh, that keeps popping up. You won in the books. It feels personal, real.
What's really interesting there is how this strong connection exists despite how challenging their art can be sometimes.
Exactly. As we discussed, the music, the language, it can feel alienating initially, or be genuinely hard to wrap your head around according to sources like Greets, Katzengold, Kaleidoscopy, Zungenschut.
So how is that connection forged if the work itself can be difficult?
Well, maybe through those shared themes we talked about, struggle, power, but also, crucially, by actively inviting the listener in. With the more experimental Doza project stuff, the sources encourage you, the listener, to let go of our ideas of what music should be and just immerse ourselves in the experience.
So embrace the weirdness.
Pretty much. The sources repeatedly say the meaning isn't fixed, it's up to you, the listener. It's framed as about the journey, not finding the right answer, as Katzengold puts it. They actively invite you in to figure it out, to participate.
So it requires effort from the listener, too, active engagement.
Definitely. Sources like Doza Project's leak directly tell you to keep your ears open your minds curious, and be ready to step outside your comfort zones.
And wasn't there one that encouraged more research?
Yeah, Walter Trinkt actively encourages you to keep digging, read the books, listen to those rap songs, check out the diaries, and come to your own conclusions, debate it about the themes.
Don't just take their word for it.
Exactly. And similarly, the Where We Wow source urges you to engage with it because it's not meant to be background noise. It demands attention.
Okay, so this artist-audience relationship, as presented in these sources, it's far from a one-way street.
Not at all. It's portrayed as this powerful symbiotic partnership. You, the audience, aren't just recipients. You're essential fuel, crucial collaborators, active participants in this shared experience, even when, maybe especially when the art challenges you to engage on its own unconventional terms.
Right. So let's try to synthesize this whole picture now. We've covered a lot of ground, pulled threads from all these different sources. What's the big picture of Doza Crew that emerges?
Okay, let's recap. At the absolute core, you have that incredibly strong, almost impenetrable collective identity, fueled by unity, purpose, the city's energy, presented with total self-assurance.
That's the bedrock. And from that bedrock,
Comes this relentless drive for innovation, pushing boundaries constantly, creating art that deliberately feels alien, designed to challenge perceptions of music, of language.
and language itself is huge, multifaceted. On one side, playful, precise, word acrobatics building these intricate worlds.
But on the other, in narratives they present, language as a brutal, aggressive tool. Dominance, conflict, highlighting that profound, sometimes dark power of words.
And threaded through all this are those complex themes they keep returning to.
Right. Power dynamics, the struggle against darkness, but also resilience, the complexities of community, that deliberate blurring of reality and fiction.
Underneath it all, there's that dedication to craft, the process, paralleling that watchmaker mastery, collaboration, innovation, a deliberate hand guiding even the experimental stuff, where analysis might even be part of the art itself.
And finally, wrapping it all together, is that unique, essential artist-audience relationship. Not performance for others, but a shared active journey with you, the listener, whose engagement is presented as absolutely vital fuel.
So all these elements from the lyrics, the deep dives, the story excerpts, all these different formats in the sources they weave together.
Yeah, they create this vivid, consistent, and remarkably self-assured picture of Doza Cruz's ethos, their process, the world they're building. As that Das Collective source put it, it's a very compelling and self-assured tour of their unique worldview.
Okay. Well, that brings us towards the end of this particular deep dive. It was certainly complex, fascinating material to get into. Thank you for joining us on this exploration.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us. We hope that by pulling out these core messages, showing how they connect across the sources, you've gained some deep insight into the ethos driving Doza Cruz's work, straight from the perspective presented in their own words and the analyses we had.
And maybe, just maybe, it challenges some of your own ideas about what music can be, what language can do, and what that relationship between creators and their audience can look like.
Definitely food for thought.
And just as a final provocative thought for you to maybe mull over today, building on that really striking duality of language we saw,
Yeah.
how the same intense focus, the same precision that's used to create artistic word acrobatics can also manifest as these brutal verbal weapons in other contexts presented in the sources. What does that duality tell us about the responsibility that comes with mastering any powerful tool, whether it's language or a complex craft like watchmaking, or even just influence itself?
That's a heavy one to end on. The power and responsibility inherent in skill. Interesting.
Something to think about.
Definitely. So keep exploring, keep being curious.
And keep diving deep into the world around you. We'll see you next time.